Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be with you all virtually at the 2022 Encompass Policy Summit to share some thoughts about communications and technology issues, including broadband deployment and the implementation of federal broadband funding programs. The Congress and the House Energy and Commerce Committee in particular understand that broadband infrastructure is essential infrastructure, and it has been a top priority for us to address the known challenges and the opportunities before us. Of course, over the last few years, the COVID-19 pandemic has really demonstrated the importance as well as the need for high-speed internet to connect workers to jobs, students to schools, and people to each other in every community across the country. And it's become an important tool for other things as well, expanding telehealth and promoting accessible healthcare throughout the pandemic. We've seen the importance of this tool. And at the same time, we also know that 30 million Americans still lack access to high-speed internet. So we know it's time to bridge America's digital divide and build a 21st century broadband infrastructure that will meet our country's needs, not only for today, but for years to come. And that is just what we are doing now. We are focused in doing so on responding to the growing disparities that accompany this demand in who has access to the internet, how they access it, and the quality of their connections. And the pandemic has really highlighted and at times exacerbated these disparities as well. So to remedy the gaps, Congress has invested in significant broadband expansion, especially over the last year. With the American Rescue Plan Act, and of course, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and now the America Competes Act. And I know that everyone who's participating here today is focused on bringing more broadband into the market, and Encompass member companies like Crown Castle, which is headquartered in my district in Houston, are focused on how we can get as many Americans online as possible, while also giving them choices in providers and content. And so I serve on the Communications and Technology Subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee. And in this Congress, we've advanced several bills to achieve our goals. And those priorities, again, are reflected in the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and the America Competes Act that we passed last week. In working to close the digital divide, I was so glad to vote for the $65 billion investment in broadband access and deployment through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, including making the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program permanent as the Affordable Connectivity Program. And as these programs are developed, that we have authorized and appropriated funds for in the last couple of years, and last year in particular, we will work with the Department of Commerce and with the FCC on the development and implementation of these programs to make sure that the intent of the Congress is being reflected. Because what the funds will do will really help spur additional investment in and deployment of our broadband infrastructure. But we also know that there's more to do. To close the digital divide across the country, we really need to support communities as they upgrade and increase broadband capabilities. And one way that Congress can do this is by providing cities and local governments with the resources they need to quickly process the expected increase, the really monumental increase in permitting applications necessary to build out this broadband infrastructure. Local governments will play a critical role in facilitating these upgrades and new deployments through their zoning and permitting functions. And in my district, in the city of Houston, has become a model for prioritizing these critical investments in broadband infrastructure, streamlining the processes for broadband deployment and for issuing permits. And ultimately, by improving the permitting processes, I think Houston has facilitated significant investments at a time when access to the internet is really critical to every aspect of life. So recognizing, of course, these good ideas right at home, and recognizing that communities across the country could benefit from these kinds of additional resources, I introduced the Broadband Incentives for Communities Act to facilitate broadband upgrades and deployment. And this bill will help communities upgrade and expand their broadband infrastructure by creating a grant program to provide local and state governments with the resources and flexibility necessary to navigate broadband deployment successfully. Specifically, it creates a grant program under the National Telecommunications Information Administration to give communities new resources to train and hire employees in the permitting departments, hire additional human resources, and also purchase updated technology to facilitate the permitting process. It also requires NTIA to convene stakeholders to discuss and find solutions to the challenges of efficiently deploying broadband in their communities, assembling local firsthand knowledge and ideas on complex issues. Local governments are critical partners in achieving nationwide high-speed broadband, and my bill will help ensure that these critical funds are efficiently and effectively used, and that communities across the country obtain the benefits of this essential infrastructure. It's critical that we ensure that every American has access to broadband, no matter where they live, no matter how young or old they are, and helping with deployment is one way to make this a reality. So we have to take on policy initiatives to ensure the long-term sustainability of existing federal support programs for the benefit of consumers, including seniors and businesses. And that's why I was also very pleased to join several of my colleagues, lead colleague, Congressman Joe Neguse, in introducing in the House the Reforming Broadband Connectivity Act. That's a bill designed to reform the FCC's Universal Service Fund while taking into account the fairness and relative burden of any changes. As we look to expand broadband access, we must look to protect the security and viability of existing technologies. And last week, as I mentioned earlier, we voted for the America Competes Act, which will go a long way toward that goal. It funds an innovative, leap ahead technologies in the United States mobile broadband market and directs the FCC to identify potential emerging issues with respect to 6G networks. So we really have a unique opportunity in this moment to capitalize on these substantial, hugely significant federal investments to close the digital divide, to connect people and communities. And to do that successfully, we have to work together to ensure that communities across the country obtain the essential benefits of this essential infrastructure. So I thank you all for the work that you are doing and your collaboration on this important issue, and I really thank you for inviting me to share these thoughts this morning. I'm glad to be with you.